gentleman.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Kennedy for raising this motion around the leasing arrangements of the Port of Darwin. Of course, I don't always agree, in fact, probably more often than not, but there's no denying his passion for our country and for our sovereignty and for our future. It'll be no surprise, of course, to anyone here that I care deeply about this issue, and this issue obviously highlights the strategic importance of Darwin to Australia and the wider Indo-Pacific, particularly in these days. And I've always said this, even before I was in this place. I was speaking up about this issue and about the disgraceful decision that was made by the Country Liberal Party, and our colleague here from the other side says we shouldn't take political potshots, but let's just call a spade a spade. There is a thing called responsibility, and when you make a decision that's wrong, you take responsibility for it. We cannot forget that that deal was also enabled by the federal coalition when they were in government in 2015. And my colleague also alluded to some of the ministers and former ministers who, whilst in this place and then immediately after leaving this place, enabled this travesty. Now, last month it was announced that the Department of Defence would conduct a review into security implications for the leasing arrangements for the port. And in fact, of course, I welcome that, been calling for it for a long time. It comes 6 years after the words of Mr Dennis Richardson, the former Secretary of the Department of Defence, and he said in 2015, and I quote, "Defence does not have any security concerns about the sale of the port to Chinese interests. No part of Defence had a concern from a security perspective in respect of the sale," end quote.
Shame.
Now,
Absolutely shame.
Madam Deputy Speaker, 99 years is a very long time. So, to the review, we do not know when the review will be finished. We do not know, but I trust that it will be a serious review this time, and not just another political fig leaf to protect this government, those opposite, from their past mistakes. Now, I thank the member for Kennedy for this motion, and I share his frustration about this issue. But I do disagree with the motion of the member for Kennedy in his call to ensure that the Port of Darwin is sold only to an Australian company. I don't think we should limit ourselves in that regard. There are ongoing tensions in our region, and we must consider carefully how the port is divested should the federal government make that decision based on the advice from the Department of Defence. But, Deputy Speaker, we've long relied on international capital, so we shouldn't be making decisions based solely on the national origin of companies that want to do business here, so let's keep an open mind. But it would be a mistake, obviously, to ignore the security risk presented from specific companies seeking to make specific investments, particularly when it comes to critical infrastructure. In this instance, obviously, it's a no-brainer that Landbridge was an inappropriate company to lease such an important piece of infrastructure to, let alone for 99 years, as we've seen. Geostrategic situations can move quickly and have. I just want to quickly mention some former Royal Australian naval officers that went to work for Landbridge, and they are honourable men, they are patriots, and they really took that into their role. But of course, we can't always depend on Landbridge employing, or any other company employing, former Australian defence personnel in these roles. So I'm pleased that the member for Kennedy's raised this issue. I agree that the lease should not have been approved, and that the Port of Darwin deal was a bad deal for the territory and for the country. So ensuring national security is the primary responsibility of a federal government. We live in an era of increasing complexity, so protecting our national security is multifaceted, but the Port of Darwin deal is not and has never been a complex issue. It is indeed a no-brainer. It wasn't in our interest, it shouldn't have been made. And the government must not kick this defence review, with the input of other important agencies, down the road. And once